Dotson, so if you remember, my project is on air pollution in Bangladesh versus Grenada. And since I talked a lot in my paper about the differences between the actual countries, Bangladesh and Grenada, I'm going to start out more with the medical aspect of it and more of the anatomical stand, which, would make sense because we're in anatomy. And so, if you find this video a little boring, I'm sorry, but personally, I find it pretty inspirational. Oh, starting out with a joke. Actually, this is my third time recording this video, so that joke has gotten really old. Anyway, okay, so I'm going to start out with a few quick stats for you. The first is that all air pollution in the entire world accounts for over 2 million deaths a year, and a large percentage of that is due to the toxins of fossil fuel combustion, which is, from cars, from factories, things like that. And cars alone account for, not just cars, like cars, trucks, any kind of transportation accounts for over 70% of the total air pollution in the world, which is absolutely insane. And in countries that have really high amounts of air pollution, it can knock as high as 9 years off of their lives, which is absolutely insane. And Bangladesh is the quote-unquote worst air quality in the world, according to the World Health Organization, which I'll talk about later. But real quick, how is it measured? In case you are interested, the measurement, according to the Environmental Protection Agency, it measures 5 pollutants in the ambient air, which is just air that we breathe, and that's lead, ozone, nitrous dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter, which is also known as PM 2.5. And the PM 2.5 is what's known as the standard. That is what is a standard particulate matter size, which is about 1/20th the size of the diameter of a single hair follicle that you have. If you have a PM that's smaller than 2.5, it becomes really dangerous, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Basically, when you have a smaller particulate matter, it increases the likelihood that it can go further into your respiratory system, all the way down to your alveoli and your lungs. Okay, so the general problems with air pollution, there's a lot, and the first is like acid rain, which that doesn't just affect drinking water, that'll affect agriculture and corrosion and a bunch of other stuff. But there's also the ozone layer depletion, which obviously is harmful because then the harmful UV rays can get in. But anyway, there's a ton of problems with air pollution, but the main two that we're going to be focusing on are the respiratory and the cardiovascular systems, because those relate to anatomy. So, real quick, what is quote-unquote pollution? When you think of pollution, or when most people think of pollution, they're thinking about the gases, the nitrogen dioxide and the benzene, little molecules, and smog. Those are the two things that really make up quote-unquote pollution. And here's a little diagram for you. These the little benzene molecules and the nitrogen dioxide, and then these big ugly globules there are smog. And this is a lung cell. So what happens is the smog will attach itself to the lung cell, and the lung cell gets really stressed out. It gets, I guess you could call it scared, and it starts to send out chemical signals to the rest of your body to know that, hey, it's kind of freaking out. And actually these smaller molecules are going to be able to go further down into your respiratory system because they're so small that they can just travel through a lot of layers of tissues and stuff like that, which we're going to talk about in just a second. So here is the quote-unquote primary target of air pollution. It's your respiratory system. This is the major factor that is affected by air pollution, so it's obviously going to be what we're going to talk about for a little bit. So the first symptoms that you're going to have are the irritation of your nasal cavity and your trachea. So air pollution is generally pretty acidic. Just the different chemicals in it, or the toxins, the smog, everything, it's pretty acidic. So when it goes down, when you inhale it, you are making yourself susceptible to burning the cilia in your nose. And just all these different things added up together kind of start to irritate the whole canals and the tubes of the respiratory system, including the damaging of the epithelium, which is the lining on the tubes, and that causes susceptibility to infection, and then that in turn will allow for inflammation. Now, this is a bronchial tube, and your lungs go in the order of your bronchial tubes, then you have your bronchioles, then you have your alveolar ducts, and you finally have your little sacs, the alveoli, or the alveoli, whatever. So these are two drawings of a bronchial tube, and then this is just a regular one on a regular person, and then this is a person with asthma. Now, as you can probably see, the person with asthma's bronchial tube is a lot more inflamed. It would also be full of mucus. And so that's one thing, that's why a lot of times they say that air pollution will cause asthma, is because when you have this narrowing, not as much air can go through there, so it's harder to breathe, and that's kind of what asthma is. It's when you need help breathing from the inhalers or whatever the case may be, and that's why air pollution can worsen those cases. So moving on to the cardiovascular system, this is only the secondary target, so it's not quite as big of a threat, but it's still, it's still up there. So I'm actually going to start down here and then jump up here. So the particulate matter that is small enough, the really small molecules, they can make it all the way down to your alveoli sacs, all the way down here to these grapes. And that is where your carbon dioxide and your oxygen exchange. That's where your blood from the veins and the arteries exchange. That's your deoxygenated and your oxygenated blood. This is where it happens, in these alveoli. So obviously when you have all these particulate matter pieces floating around in the alveoli, it's not good. It's going to thicken your blood, and that's going to increase coagulation and thrombosis, which, and also can promote I'm so sorry, it's been a day. Atherosclerosis, which is the hardening of your arteries, and all of this, all just because of air pollution. So, wrap it up, to put it simply, air pollution can cause asthma. These are the most common symptoms: asthma, skin and eye irritation, poor lung development. Oh, okay, so poor lung development, I'm sorry, I forgot to talk about that. So when you're a child, not even a child, you're an infant, you're a fetus, still in your mother, you have lungs, but they're flat, they're not inflated, they're just flat, they haven't completely formed yet, the alveoli haven't separated, they're kind of more in like a globule form, and then as you grow up, as you're born, that's when everything starts to change. That's when your lungs develop. Your lungs don't actually finish developing until you're in your late teens, and then they develop up until you're in your mid to late 30s, and they actually start to decrease in their development, and they start to shrink and not fill and grow as much as they will retract, which is actually kind of interesting. But there was a study done on infants who lived in very highly congested areas with air pollution, and then kids that lived in really clean air. And the people that had to live with the high amounts of air pollution, their lungs developed 10% slower than those of the people who lived with clean air, which is insane. That's crazy. For those 13 years of their life, from zero, they measured it from the moment that they were born to when they're 13 years old, their lung development was decreased by 10% because of air pollution. And then this is also, I'm sorry, I totally forgot to finish this. Also, heart disease, cancer with your carcinogens, obviously, because that's what a carcinogen is. It's a cancer-causing agent. And lung disease. These are all things that can come just from the air pollution. So now I can start talking a little bit about the countries. So I had Bangladesh and Grenada. So the first thing to be talked about is the size of them. Bangladesh is huge. Well, relative to Grenada, it's huge. Grenada is this little guy over here, not even 13,000 kilometers, and square kilometers. And Bangladesh is, well over 147,000. So then when you look at the population, Bangladesh is 11 times more populated than Granada. And you're like, all right, that's fine because it's so much bigger, it's supposed to be more populated. But then when you look at the density, that is when things get a little iffy because Bangladesh is 18 times as dense as Granada, which is insane. For a country that is so much bigger to be 18 times as dense as this little teeny tiny country, that's just I can't imagine the amount of people. So, for further comparison, if it's still kind of vague, if this is Bangladesh, this is your entire country of Bangladesh, and your population density is 1,174 people per kilometer squared, then your comparison to Granada is this. That's it. This entire orange area has 18 times the density of people as this tiny little square here. So that is obviously a very quick kind of put two and two together, and you can start to see where some problems might develop with air pollution. Just from looking at that, the population in itself is so uncontrollable and so high that, I mean, how can you not have bigger problems? How can you control that many people? So that's just kind of an overview of the comparison between the two countries. So when you start to look at the actual countries themselves, this is Bangladesh, and if you can see, it is all buildings. All of this is industry, everything, and that's exactly what it is. Bangladesh is a country that thrives on their industry. That's what they do. Their economy, is built off of export. So they kind of have to have all these buildings, but then with all these buildings and such a high population and such a high density, they have a ton of cars to get from point A to point B because it's such a big country that you're probably not going to be working 5 minutes from home. It's unlikely. And it's just problems on top of problems. You have all the cars, you have all the buildings, you have all these people jammed in here. It's a lot of pollution coming out at a not very high rate. It's insane. So I also tried to get a picture of the smog level in Bangladesh, and this is what came out. No, it's not a problem with my printer. I mean, it kind of is, but not too bad. It's not really a problem with my printer. Like, if you just look at here, that is genuinely the picture that was on the internet. It is ridiculous how much smog is in these areas. You can't even take a picture. I mean, you can see it, but you can't. It's foggy, it's hazy. This is an average work day in the summer when the sun is beating down and intensifying these toxins and absolutely just making everything, just amplifying it. It's unhealthy, absolutely unhealthy. So that's Bangladesh. And then when you look at Granada, it's a different world. You have trees, you have mountains, you have beaches. All these buildings, these are not industry buildings. These are houses for the most part, because Granada isn't very advanced. They're still kind of in their own little world, if you want to say. They use markets. They don't use too many cars. Since Granada's so small, a lot of people can walk places, bike places. It's more of a scenic place, which is why their main source of their income is tourism, because it's a beautiful little place to go, and it has the cleanest air in the world. And so that's what it is. They don't have to really use industry. They're not huge on pollution in general, for that matter. And they just that's what Granada is. It's so clean. It's not an industrial place. It's more for the tourism and more agricultural than industry by far. So when you look at that and then you look at Bangladesh, I don't know, you can tell me where you'd rather live, but I'm going to go with Granada. So that, I think, is basically all that you may need to know about air pollution in Bangladesh versus Granada. I hope you were amused. I really hope you found it inspirational. But just throwing the second joke at ya. And I thank you for watching.